Afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to give you an update on AuKing Mining's latest activities. It's been a busy 16 months since we relisted on the ASX back in June last year. We've focused on our copper zinc project in Western Australia called Coongie Park. And then, as James alluded to, we've just recently entered into an agreement to acquire some uranium ground in Tanzania. So that's an indication of our projects. Coongie Park in northeastern Western Australia, and the projects we're acquiring in Tanzania, a series. There's about half a dozen of them, but two of which I'll focus on in more detail, are particularly prospective for uranium. So with Coongie Park, we entered a farming agreement to earn a 75% interest by spending $3 million over 3 years. We've well and truly blown through that in the last 16 months, where we're now sitting at 80% of the project, with having secured the initial 75, then some additional expenditure over the course of this year, which has led to the dilution of the other party's interest. One of the things that we focused on with the drilling last year, there was a 7,500 metre drilling program focusing on the two main deposits at Coongie Park called Oneiden and San Diego. And we really just wanted to focus the drilling there to get a head around the resource, and the drilling from that activity enabled us to get a great deal of certainty. And then earlier this year we published an upgrade to the existing JORC resource, so we're now quoting a combined resource between the two deposits of 8.9 million tonnes. The next diagram shows you the location of the project, and also one of the things about Halls Creek, it's not the best known province in Western Australia from a mining perspective. It was the area of, a little bit of trivia, was the first gold rush area in Western Australia in the late 1880s, but there is a fair bit going on where we are. Halls Creek's the main town in the zone, in that region, with Kununurra further to the north. Nicholson's gold mine, which is operated by Pantoro. There's the Savannah nickel mine, which Panorama operate just up the road. The Panton PGM with Future Metals. Several rare earth projects. So there's quite a lot going on in Halls Creek. It's a town of 1,500 people. It's your typical sort of little country mining town, but all the resources are there. There's an airstrip, you can get into the town okay. So we're very pleased to be situated in that part of the world. With our program last year, as I mentioned, 7.5, it says 6.5, but it's closer to 7.5. But we reported some outstanding drilling results from some of the drilling there last year. There was a couple of holes there, went more than 100 metres at more than 1% copper, and then that hole AORD 04, which went 105 metres at nearly 2% copper. So, and they were in that Oneiden deposit, and I'll come back to Oneiden in the context of some metallurgical test work a little bit later on. But there's a fair bit of metal, and that's all very close to the surface. So there's a fair bit of metal in that Oneiden deposit, and San Diego is very much the same. Although in terms of metal there is a fair bit of metal, but it's more an underground deposit with quite a lot of cobalt running through the San Diego area. So between those two deposits there's a lot to be done in terms of potential development. And then in terms of this year, our focus has then been to develop and increase the size of the resource at Coongie Park. So you'll see in that diagram that shows the shading there, which is our entire tenure package at Coongie Park, that 500 square kilometres of ground, situated just outside of Halls Creek to the southwest of town. We're right on the Great Northern Highway, Highway 1 up there. So in terms of access to the projects, it's very easy to get to. But one of the areas that I'd really like to focus on is to the west of our tenure package called EMUL. Now that's a project that Northern Star Resources did a significant amount of work on before they acquired the Paulsens mine back in around 2010. It was probably their biggest project at the time, and they did a whole lot of work. We've got access to all that data, and we've gone in this year with focus on that area with a couple of other areas, but EMUL is going to be a focus of our activities going forward based on what we've seen. So with EMUL, as I mentioned, there's a main deposit area which Northern Star drilled. We've also drilled some holes in there. And that drilling on its own will now form the basis. We're doing work right at the moment of an initial resource estimate. There's somewhere nearly 100 holes that have been drilled in that area. But in addition to that, there's a couple of magnetic anomalies that stretch to the northwest and another one to the southwest, which we're looking to. We've just secured heritage clearance to be able to do some work on those areas next year. So the aim for the next little while, get the initial resource estimate out for EMAL, and then look to significantly increase that deposit. It's very near surface. You're virtually straight into fresh rock, so it's fairly easy from a metallurgical perspective into the sulphides. Lower grade, which is important because we need to find more tonnes, but at this stage looking very encouraging. In terms of the Oneida deposit metallurgy, as I mentioned, there's a lot of metal in that near surface Oneida deposit. But one of the primary reasons why this project hasn't been advanced over many years is people have got stuck on the metallurgy at Oneida. And in summary, it's essentially it's the weathered area, the oxide, the transition area in the sort of top 100, 120 metres of material. Very heavy iron content. And what we've been doing this year, we've worked with a group out of Perth that have the Australian rights to some ammonia leaching technology, and very recently we reported some very significant recoveries from our latest round of test work, up to around 90% for the copper and the zinc. So we're heading right down in the right direction with this metallurgical test work program, and it really sets the scene for us to establish a much more detailed program of test work next year. The project has Commonwealth R&D incentive approval, so in essence there's 43.5 cents in the dollar refund that comes from expenditure directly related to that activity. Then moving to Tanzania, as James mentioned, we recently acquired these areas in Tanzania. Very prospective from a uranium focus, and that's something that we're really interested in. We think having a dual focus of copper / base metals and then uranium is something that's going to, I think, attract a lot of interest over the next little while. The tenure areas, there's a couple in particular. There's a Manyoni in the central area, and then Makuju to the south, and then both of these areas were the subject of a substantial amount of exploration and development work leading up to 2011, when the Fukushima disaster changed the world in terms of the uranium. So yeah, so that'll be the focus of our activities straight after completion of the transaction. We're looking to have shareholder approval around middle of December, and then that'll put us in a position where we can complete the transaction. And as part of the deal, we're raising another $3.5 million, which will keep us going well into next year in terms of project activities, not only in Tanzania but with Kunji Park going forward. So in terms of Tanzania, it's a jurisdiction that's had a more recent checkered history. Back in 2017, the President decided to change the mining laws almost overnight. But that attitude has now completely changed. There's a new president there, Her Excellency Suluhu Hassan. She's very focused on promoting mining in Tanzania, and they're aiming to get to 10% of GDP, with mining contributing to that by 2025. And you can get a sense that things are happening over there. There's a lot of the big companies are moving into Tanzania. BHP are investing $90 million into a nickel project. Barrick are well back into it. They've had that project on ice for several years, but they're now producing around 500,000 ounces of gold. And then you've got this massive LNG project that's getting a lot of attention. So we really like the way things are moving in Tanzania and the uranium sector generally. Very briefly, that's the Makuju project. Nyota in the southwestern corner, which our tenure runs up to, that's a world-class uranium project. It's owned by Uranium One, which is now Russian-owned. But we've got a very prospective area of tenure, which has been the subject of significant work done in the past, which we'll be focusing on going forward. The Same thing with Manyoni. That's an area in central Tanzania, and that was Urinex. It's still listed. It's called something else, but they did an enormous amount of work. They've got a JORC resource on that project already. Needs to be upgraded to 2012 standards, but that's what we're looking to do virtually straight after the transaction's completed. In terms of a summary of why you would look at us, we really like our projects and the locations. We've got a very strong board, and I'll just come to that in a minute. Low market cap for the existing resources that we have, and being in a position where we've got copper and uranium marketability, I think that puts us in a strong position going forward. But in terms of the board, we've made two very important additions to the board in the last month or so. Anna Nahaski-Staples and Asimwe Kabunga have both joined the board. Anna was first up, and then Asimwe joined us as part of the Tanzanian transaction. They're both based in Perth, which is also quite important for a company with a West Australian project. But no, look, we're very happy with the two additions to the board, and we're looking to leverage off the expertise and the following that these people have. So look, we're very excited about where the company's situated now. We're funded into next year, and we're hopefully to be able to produce results and information flow to the market over the next several weeks and months. So thank you for the opportunity.